always nice to catch up with research and what's going on. And, certainly, I've had the privilege of working on the board for the last 5 years or so at both the state and the national level. And it's truly an honor for me to be here in this room with this group today. Probably one of my favorite types of events is being here with patients, with caregivers, with the people who are really impacted by what we do. And to be able to speak today about something I'm certainly passionate about, which is our advocacy programs. I know that Pam asked for a show of hands for patients and survivors in the room. I'd like to see that again, because really that's why we're here today. So if we can give a round of applause to everybody. I know there's probably a lot of caregivers in the room too, and caregivers, let's get some hands for caregivers as well. Maybe this works? Maybe I have to go here. You probably know what advocacy is as a caregiver. I mean, it really is, as the slide shows, it's giving your voice on behalf of another. And as caregivers, you've been doing that for a long time already. You know that being an advocate, a patient advocate, is an important part of going through the medical process, of dealing with the medical environment of a patient, whether it's in the cancer world or not. Every one of us, in fact, all of us, should probably be advocates as well. And going beyond being a medical advocate or a patient advocate, there are things that we can do to help make the best of this environment. And advocacy, to me, I actually look back even at the Constitution where it says, "We the people," to promote the general welfare is kind of an advocacy piece for me as well. I think it's our responsibility to give a voice to those who have none, and to make sure that we're providing the best possible care for children and patients and their families. So how do we do that? Well, what we do is we work with patients, we work with and to promote policies that improve the lives of blood cancer patients and their families. And over the next several slides, we'll look at some things that we've been able to do in the state of Illinois, as well as federally, and looking at some of the challenges that we have coming up to see what we can do to help, and looking for ways that you can help in things that we're looking to do. So we've had a few things in Illinois, a few recent wins, which have been big deals to cancer patients and actually patients for multiple diseases. But some of the big ones recently have been clinical trials. So access to clinical trials, probably one of the most important tools that researchers have. It's a way to test out theories, to test out drugs, to test out effectiveness of treatment. And prior to this law, it was a little difficult for patients not only to get access, but to actually have continued health care access through the clinical trial. Patients who were involved in this certainly have helped drive medical research forward, medical technologies forward, but it's been challenging as a patient to some degree to be part of this. If there was an ancillary health issue, if you need to see your doctor again, health insurance wouldn't necessarily cover your treatment outside the trial. And while you're in the trial, certainly the drug companies, the research groups are paying for everything. But if there was something unrelated, or maybe an extra doctor's visit, insurance companies were almost treating you as you were uninsured. So there was a tremendous out-of-pocket cost. So prior to last year, the cost to patients as part of the clinical trials, if you were able to get in, was great. Since we were able to pass this law within this state, now people are covered by insurance during clinical trials. So the financial burden of them is much less. Your health care is covered. You're not considered uninsured to some degree anymore. So now, thanks to in part to LLS and certainly in part to other advocacy groups and advocates individually, we've been able to pass this law. We also, and for me this was a big one, oral chemotherapy laws. And I think Todd kind of talked about it a little bit in his presentation, but oral chemotherapy treatments are an exciting development at this point. Of the 400 drugs that are in the pipeline right now, more than 25% of these are oral drugs. And in the past, and you saw the video too, I mean, it was, you're going into the hospital, you're getting an injection, you're going through a treatment that's invasive. I mean, there's your chance of infection, you're leaving your home, there's a greater cost by being at the hospital. Not at home. Now there's drugs, there's pills that you can take at the comfort of your own home without having to go to the doctor, without having to visit the hospital, without having to get an IV started or risk any type of illness. It's simple, it's still just as effective, it's certainly less expensive to an insurance company because it's a pill. You're not having all the ancillary costs around the doctor's visit, the hospital visit. And you would think that something less expensive, that something simpler would be something that the insurance companies would jump on and want to cover right away. And sadly, they didn't. If you were on an oral chemotherapy up until last year, that wasn't covered. You were paying a tremendous out-of-pocket expense. You would think that something simple and easy to would have been an easy solution for the insurance companies. But despite the fact that it was less money, it was less hospital stays, it was less doctor visits, insurance companies refused to treat that and to pay for that. But last year, through many cancer advocates, many from LLS and from around other organizations, we were able to change the laws in Illinois, and now there's a mandate that insurance treat oral chemotherapy equally. And sometimes it just takes that voice. I mean, a simple thought, a simple group of people coming together to make a difference really can make the difference. Here was an idea, here was a new drug concept. It's the same types of drugs, it's just in a different form. Let's make this more effective, let's make this more accessible, and let's make it affordable for the patients to be able to take. And that type of voice, that passion, that ability to go and make a change is really what advocacy is all about. And that's where all of you can come in. We're involved in advocacy programs not just in Illinois, but nationally, and actually in almost every state, but nationally as well. And there's a few items that we've got coming up in the upcoming session of Congress. And really, most of them, as you can see by this slide, on the research side, it's all about funding. Todd has had a slide up earlier that showed last year we put in about $76 million into research, and that's great. And in the last 40 some odd years, LLS has invested just over $800 million into research, and that's a fantastic number. In the next 10 years, we've made a commitment as the society, the national board, to put over $1 billion into research funding over the next decade, which eclipses what we've done since our inception. It's a huge amount of money. But in the grand scheme of things, $1 billion over 10 years is not enough. It's not even close. While we are the largest funder of blood cancer research in the country, privately, the U.S. government in funding the National Institutes of Health, the National Cancer Institute, is far beyond what we can do. And sadly, over the last 6 years or so, funding to the NIH has decreased significantly. So those of us in the private sector, the nonprofit sector, we're trying to make up that gap, and it's impossible to do. We need to really look at how can we fund research and making sure that our congressmen, our senators, our representatives understand the fact that research funding is a critical need that needs to be met. It's not something that we can let go. And while there are those who will say that in a down economy, in a recession, in the current budgetary crisis that we can't afford to do it, I would say we can't afford not to do it. Research not only saves lives, but research also actually creates jobs, and it promotes and stimulates the economy. So we need to spend our time looking at how we can help fund research, not just here in Illinois, but throughout the country, to make sure that patients have access to the best possible care and the best possible drugs and the best possible treatments. Beyond funding, we certainly have some patient access issues that we need to address as well, and we'll look at 3 of them as we go on here. The first, and I'm going to read a quote that I pulled off out of the dictionary today, and it's about insurance. And it's a relatively generic quote, but it's about, the definition of insurance was a means of guaranteeing protection where one party assumes the risk for the other. And of course, along with that assumption of risk, there's a cost, and that cost is your insurance premium. So insurance is certainly one of the barriers that people face in dealing with their treatments. Sadly, years ago, when it came down to prescription drugs, there seemed to be really 2 different types of drugs that there were. You had your generic drugs, which were relatively inexpensive. You paid a very small copay, and you had access to them. And then there were the non-generics. And you paid a little bit more for those because the drug companies were steering you to something less. Later on, there became another tier, so you had those other drugs became kind of the preferred drugs. They were not as inexpensive as generics, but they certainly were not as expensive as some of the others. And they added another layer, so we now had 3. And now we're looking at this specialty tier of drugs. So they keep kind of classifying drugs in different ways and making them more and more and more expensive to get to. And certainly the newer treatments, the newer technologies, the newer drugs, whether they're for cancer or for MS or for lupus or Alzheimer's, they tend to fall into this specialty tier range, which has an extremely high copay. And we're not talking about the difference between a $10 copay to a $50 or $100 copay. We're talking about thousands of dollars. And that, to most people, myself included, I'm not sure how many people can afford thousands of dollars a month for drugs. So we're looking at legislation and working with as an advocacy group, not just us, with others, as to how do we make sure that there's a legislative remedy to cap out-of-pocket expenses on prescription drugs. If there's a medical treatment out, if we've spent millions and millions or billions of dollars in research and we're making it unaffordable for patients, it's not an effective treatment. So how do we make sure we get it into people's hands? And this is one we've all heard about. Sadly, we've all heard about this. There's been news for the last several months about drug shortages. And these are drug shortages across many different diseases, specifically cancers. A lot of them, however, seem to affect childhood cancers, but it certainly affects many people in many cases. In some cases, the drug shortages were related to quality issues. In some cases, they were related to financial issues, mostly because, these drugs typically are generics. There's not a high profit margin. There just doesn't seem to be as much concern about the ability to get them produced. But what we can do, what should be done, is a little bit more notification. With some notification, with some highlights, there's other places who can pick up that manufacturing. There's other technologies that we can utilize. There'd be a little bit of a chance for doctors to look at alternative treatments or to find alternative sources for drugs. And unfortunately, we get to this very end stage where all of a sudden there's no drugs available. And again, it doesn't do a whole lot of good to have a good diagnosis, a good doctor, a good place to get treated if I don't have access to the treatment. So LLS is adamantly supporting the Preserving Access to Life-Saving Medications Act, which would make sure that when a drug manufacturer is coming up to a shortage or they anticipate a shortage, that we will know about it, that other drug companies will know about it, maybe they can pick up the slack, that they'll be able to pick up information or pick up the manufacturing, and even worse, that there's certainly some good legal action for those who are doing price gouging, or even worse than price gouging on the availability of these drugs, creating a fake alternative. So people are paying for prescriptions that aren't real. We want to make sure that the drugs are there, they're available, they're affordable, and patients have access to them when they need them. So currently in Illinois, we have a few initiatives going on today, and another one is for cord blood banking. And this is one of these things to me, again, I look at like the oral chemotherapy where it's almost a no-brainer that the drug company should, or the insurance company should just cover that. This is another one, cord blood banking. Studies now have shown that umbilical cord blood is a tremendous source, rich in stem cells, and there's the potential for treatment, for research, for so many things. And today, in the most part, it's considered medical waste, so it's discarded. This is not something new, not something different. This is just, it happens every day. Women give birth, and cord blood and placenta are discarded. What we're looking for in the state is to allow the hospitals access to collect that, and for making sure that there's information for mothers and for doctors and for nurses that donating cord blood to a public cord blood bank is a viable option. You don't have to pay for it privately. You don't have to discard it, but you can actually store that. It can be given to researchers to help promote new treatments and new technologies. It can be used for families who need those stem cells. It's a great way potentially to treat blood cancers. We're certainly supporting a legislative bill that's out there now that makes sure all licensed hospitals give parents the option to be able to donate that cord blood. Again, simple type of thing, but it takes a voice. It takes people who care, people like you in this room, people like all of us on the board and on the staff with LS, to make sure that when these issues do come up, that we have a cohesive message that we can send, that we can go out and reach to our representatives and make sure that things like this get through, that there's an awareness of it, that there's laws that can be passed, regulations that can be modified, and there's education for the people who need it. So how can you help? There are many ways you can help. Many, many, many ways. And they don't have to be difficult ones. It doesn't require you getting in a car and driving down to Springfield and meeting with the legislator. It doesn't require necessarily a lot of your time and effort, but there's a lot of different things that you can do to give your voice on behalf of somebody else. What we need at LLS is really a strong advocacy network, and we're building that today, but we need more. I can tell you from personal experience, and I've met with and spoken to and emailed, written, called, sat down over coffee with most of our representatives in the state, on the national side too, and having a meeting, they certainly recognize, and getting a phone call or an email, they'll do something about, but it's just one. But if they get 2 emails, they start to think a little bit. And if they get 5, they really start to think. And especially if they're getting together and talking amongst themselves and they realize that 2 or 3 people have brought up something like cord blood or oral chemotherapy or access to prescription drugs. But when you get 10 and 20 and 100 and 1,000 people who have started to talk about this across multiple districts and across multiple parties, then they really start to pay attention. And so you can help in a lot of different ways. You can join our advocacy website and our Advocacy Network, which is a tremendously easy thing to do. I got an email yesterday, as a matter of fact, that said there's a call for action on a pediatric cancer bill that's coming through Congress today. And it's as simple as me logging in. I put in my name, I put in my password, and boom, it knows where I live, so it knows who my representatives are. It's already got a templated letter that I can alter if I want to, or if I don't, I can just hit submit, and it automatically gets submitted to where it needs to go. It's a simple way to reach out to my legislators without really any time out of my busy day. We all are inundated by emails and messages and everything else throughout the day. It's a simple way to help. But you can do more, and some people want to do more, some people want to do less. We're willing to take anybody. If you want to help in some way, we will certainly be part of that. So help, you can join our advocacy committee. Like I said, you can come down to Springfield. You can call, you can write, you can email, you can give some ideas to the overall group. But it's really a matter of how can you help us get that message out. And that's not a message for us, that's a message for you. For the patients who are in this room, for the caregivers who are in this room, for patients worldwide, how do we help get our message out? So we're looking for you to help. And that, for the most part, is our discussion about advocacy. But I did want to end with a little whimsical, but certainly appropriate quote from maybe one of my favorite authors, Dr. Seuss. And I read this last night, and just as I was preparing, I saw this, and I thought this is actually kind of the perfect thing for advocacy and what it really means. And it Sue said, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing's going to get better. It's not. So we need your help. It's a good cause. Obviously, you're all connected to blood cancers in some way, to cancers in others. We really could use your assistance. Visit our Patient Services Committee. I think, is there a table outside? For Patient Services, join the Advocacy Committee, and certainly sign up for the Action Network. It's simple and easy. Name and address. We'll be able to get your information out there. But I want to thank you for your time this morning, and certainly thank you for helping us create a world without blood cancer. But I don't get to leave. I have a few housekeeping items, I suppose. So there's a couple of things. One is in relation to, I don't have all the paper. In relation to the rest of the day. Apparently, right about now, we're going to take a break. So I'm sure you can't wait for me to stop talking. And after the break, there are a couple of breakout sessions, and those are all along the hallway up here. So the rooms are labeled. I'm sure you saw the monitors outside with the room number and what this breakout session is about. This afternoon's panel will be downstairs as well as lunch. So the stairs are, I think, around the other side that way. So everybody downstairs for lunch with the group, and then we'll have our panelists downstairs as well. Please certainly stop by all of the partners' tables outside and go visit with our partners, our sponsors. They are really the ones who have helped make this conference come together and are here to help you and assist you. If you haven't already, I encourage everyone to go and find Be the Match out there and swab your cheek. That too can make a huge difference in the life of a blood cancer patient. It's quick and it's easy. It's an easy cheek swab to get on the registry. Drinks are available outside throughout the conference. Look for our LLS staff, our wonderful staff, who I know we're gathering around the back, but I'm sure they're back outside now. But check them out for any questions you might have. Certainly Todd and I are available as well. And don't forget to buy chocolates, because Mother's Day, Father's Day, frankly, for me, it's fine. Todd and I both like it. And if you would, fill out the evaluations and make sure you sign the release form. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful rest of your conference, and I'll see you later on.